Hello and welcome to the Doc Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike DeLuke, and it's my mission to help you lead a happier, healthier, and more prosperous life, both personally and professionally. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Doc Podcast. Today's episode is the start of something a little different, and honestly, something I think is going to provide a tremendous value to our audience. Over the years on this show, we've spent a lot of time discussing health, performance, entrepreneurship, practice ownership, leadership, and professional growth. But one topic that impacts virtually everyone, regardless of profession or background, is financial health and well-being. See, the reality is that many people work incredibly hard, earn a good living, and still feel uncertain when it comes to taxes, investing, retirement planning, wealth preservation, and long-term financial independence. And that's why I am really excited to launch this brand new multi-part financial series with the Vento family from Vento Tax and Wealth Management Group. What makes this series unique is that it's not just theoretical financial discussions or generic investing advice. The Vento family has spent decades helping healthcare professionals, business owners, entrepreneurs, and high-income earners navigate tax strategy, wealth management, financial planning, and long-term wealth building. In this episode, we're going to discuss the history of the firm, how it evolved into a nationally recognized financial advisory group, and why financial education has become such a major focus of their family's work. In addition, each guest is going to highlight their areas of expertise and explain what they will be discussing during the individual deep dive episodes that we're going to do in the coming months with each member of the Vento family. We're also going to discuss their brand new book, The Generational Wealth Code, which is outstanding and outlines practical tax-smart strategies designed to help individuals and families build, preserve, and sustain long-term generational wealth. This book is currently available for pre-order, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for you, our listeners, to receive practical financial education from a family that has spent decades helping professionals and entrepreneurs make smarter financial decisions. Before we begin, it is important to note that the information discussed during this series is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. For advice specific to your situation, please contact your own advisor. You can find more detailed disclosures at the end of this episode and each successive episode. So without further ado, let's get on to today's episode with the Vento family. Enjoy the show, everybody. Welcome to Doc Podcast, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
Thanks for having us, Mike.
It's my pleasure. Really looking forward to this, not only today and what we're going to discuss during today's show, but the following 4 episodes where you each will get to highlight your own areas of expertise and discuss what you do and why you do it in more detail, and really with the ultimate goal of helping the listeners understand more about a very often misunderstood and I think what some people think of as confusing aspect of our lives, which is money, especially the tax side of money and the investing side of money. So I did in the intro mention the disclaimer that this isn't for specific advice. You're not telling people what to do with their money or how to deal with their specific taxes. They do have to consult their own advisors, but it is awesome that you are here to discuss this general information. And it's really cool because it's right about when you guys are releasing a book. And I mentioned that in the intro as well, but I want to go around and just have each of you talk a little bit about your own specific area of expertise and how you got to this point in your life and career. Just for clarification, we have John Sr., who is the patriarch of the family, and we're going to start with him, and then we're going to go in the order that we're going to go in the successive episodes. So we'll go to Christine next, and then Nicole, and then to John Jr. as far as the background. So to kick it off, John Sr., if you wouldn't mind, just kind of taking us through a little bit of your history, your background, and how you got to this point in your life and career, including the amazing accomplishment of having all 3 of your children follow in your footsteps in some capacity in the financial arena and be helping you, and then culminating with this book that you're writing together as a family, which is just such a cool thing. So I'll let you take it from there.
Great. Thanks again, Mike. Thanks for inviting not just me, but my family here. The only one missing here is my wife, but that's all right. Maybe next episode.
Right.
So I'm going to give you a quick history on myself and sort of how we got to where we are now. But back in 1985, that's when I graduated college. And at that point, I became a CPA. I did my very first tax return in the basement of my parents' house in Brooklyn, semi-attached home. Parents were Italian immigrants, so I was sort of the first generation even educated with a college degree. So pretty happy about that. My brother Joe would disagree with that, by the way, because he is a medical doctor, and then my other brother and sister ultimately went to college, but they delayed it a little bit, not like myself. But the history there was pretty apparent. I mean, looking back now, going back to 1985, I would have never thought when I did that first tax return with somebody that worked for my mother, and my mother was a seamstress of all things, so in a sweatshop. That was my first break in the accounting business. But outside of that, my first job out of school, I worked at KPMG, where I focused on the healthcare sector as well as the investment service industry. I did that for about 2 years. And that's when I really went out on my own, cut my ties to the big four CPA firms and said, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own. I started up my own practice. So the history there has been, a terrific one. It's been an interesting journey. 1985 is also the same year I happened to meet my wife. We met in Manhattan at the Stout Street Seaport. My kids almost didn't have a choice. Their mother is a banker. Their father is a CPA investment advisor. So it was inevitable. Our offspring all had to be CPAs, right? That was something that couldn't have been avoided, I guess. But all joking aside, I am very proud of the fact that my children, in one form or another, followed in my footsteps, obtained their security license, became CPAs. Nicole and John also are certified financial planners. So that definitely makes me feel proud that somehow my wife and I, we must have did something right along the way.
For sure.
I think that's pretty certain. So that's sort of the brief history there. After I established my practice in 1990, I decided to get security license as well, because quite frankly, I got a little tired of giving people great advice and not being able to deliver on that advice and execute on it. So by having both the CPA hat on as well as the investment advisor hat on, I was in a position where I could really help my clients succeed. That to me was a game changer, not so much for me, but for my clients, because they had one place they could go to and pretty much get all their financial services taken care of in one location, really one-stop shop when it comes to comprehensive wealth management. So that's sort of the short version of my history before I actually got started in my practice and everything that came after that. But that pretty much summarizes, how we got at least to that point of the game.
Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting, as you were speaking, having Italian heritage myself, and my grandfather, who was older than you, significantly older than you, but he was the son of Italian immigrants, and was the first one to go on and get an education, and ultimately became a dentist and then an oral surgeon. So I understand that side of it very, very well. And then all four of his sons went into dentistry as well. And then in the next generation, just foreshadowing for your kids, there are three of us that went in. Myself and two of my cousins also went in. So over 3 generations, there are 8 DeLukes in the dental world. So I think there's definitely a genetic component and an environmental component as well. Clearly, your kids saw in you something that was appealing to them as well, plus the genes there with your wife as a banker. So that's fascinating stuff. So awesome. If you want to go from there, Christine, kind of tell us about your journey and how you got to this point that you are at now.
Sure, absolutely. As my dad mentioned, both my dad and my mom were in the finance world. So yes, it was pretty inevitable. Went to college, got my undergraduate in finance, accounting, my master's in accounting, and my CPA license over a 5-year period. And while I was in school at Penn State, I had a lot of exposure to finance and accounting. So when I graduated, I started working at KPMG in their deal advisory practice for about 1.5 years. And while I was working in Manhattan, and my now husband at the time, he was my boyfriend, he and I had met at Penn State as well. he started getting into commercial real estate in Manhattan, and that was really the first time I had any exposure to the real estate industry in particular. And I started to develop a bigger passion for real estate over traditional finance, and I decided to leave KPMG and joined a real estate firm in New York for a little over a year. And then eventually joined Inland Securities, where I now work as a senior vice president, after being introduced actually through my father to the prior senior vice president at the time, because my dad knew exactly what I was looking to do, get into real estate. And so at my current company where I work at, again, Inland, we really focus on 1031 exchange solutions. And 1031 exchange as a tax code has been in our tax code for over 100 years. But what a lot of investors are not aware of is the fact that you can do a 1031 exchange into a passive real estate investment vehicle, which was approved by the IRS back in 2004, the Delaware Statutory Trust. And that's really our bread and butter, is assisting investors with their 1031 exchanges, especially investors who are looking to now become passive and use the 1031 exchange into the Delaware Statutory Trust as an estate planning tool, so that they can now receive passive monthly income and defer their taxes from the sale of their properties, and then eventually pass their real estate on over to their heirs once they pass away, and allow them to receive the step-up in cost basis, so that they have little to no capital gains taxes to have to pay on their real estate. Because what I primarily focus on at Inland is providing 1031 exchange solutions to investors.
Awesome.
I'm also a CPA, so it really goes hand in hand with being able to work on the tax side of things with the 1031 exchange code and all the benefits that real estate offers in general, like depreciation benefits and deferral.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really looking forward as well in our episode talking about that in more detail, as you know, but for the audience, and the audience may know some of this from hearing me speak about it in certain episodes. I love the real estate side of things. It definitely helped me get to a point of financial freedom, younger than probably most do. And my line of work in orthodontics, we make a very good living, but you can also, which we'll get into the taxes and the savings a little bit more in the future, but you can spend a lot of that money very quickly. And if you don't understand how to make that money work for you and have passive income strategies, which real estate tends to be a great one to do. I've also done numerous DST or Delaware Statutory Trust 1031 exchanges with you guys for full disclosure. So you've been helpful in that process. And when we do our joint episode with just the two of us, we'll talk about that, and I'll open up on my side of things and what I've done and how I've used that for my advantage in more detail. But yeah, the real estate side of things is something I think a lot of people think when they hear real estate that it has to be, you're fixing toilets at midnight, right? And that you need to be, and look, if you want to own a duplex and do that, then all the power to you, but you can do it in ways where it really is passive. Yes, you're going to pay some more fees for that, but you're paying fees if you have to hire property managers and do all that for your own property. So, well, I'm really excited. I get a lot of questions from people on the real estate side of things, and looking forward to talking to you about that in our episode. So, Nicole.
Same here, Mike.
Thank you. So, Nicole, how about you?
Yep. So how I got into the field, really growing up, not only being around parents who both worked in finance, but seeing the passion my father had for his career, for helping clients, always brought my attention and steered me in that direction to go into finance and accounting. It really stems from the fact that I always had a passion for numbers, but I also have a strong passion for helping clients, for helping families. And the way I see it is that second really only to health concerns, finance tends to be the number one pain point of concern and anxiety for clients and individuals and families. So it's more than just, simple investment management and financial planning. I feel like the job that we have is really impacting their lives and their everyday relationships. So that's how I wound up on this path. I have a bachelor's in both finance and accounting, as well as a master's in accounting. I'm a CPA, and I'm also a certified financial planner. I started my career at Goldman Sachs. I was there for about 5 years doing sales trading for ultra high net worth clients. And as much as I loved that job and it was a great, always on your toes, you're knees deep in the markets. So I really loved it. But it didn't even provide me with the overall picture on the investment side, let alone with the overall picture on the financial planning side. So I moved on to do more of a traditional wealth management role through private banking at JPMorgan. But again, there I found myself more in a relationship management type of role rather than really getting in the weeds with clients on their everyday financial needs and financial concerns. So I decided to translate everything I learned through my corporate life into bringing it back to my family practice. So I've been a financial advisor here now for almost 2 years at my family's practice. And I've been able to learn a ton both from my father and from my brother. One of the biggest advantages of practicing here is the tax smart solutions we incorporate into everything, which you don't always get in traditional wealth management firms. So I focus on everything from investment management. I lead our investment committee in selecting investment products, customizing solutions for clients, depending on their situation. If they have large concentrated positions, maybe they just went through a liquidity event. So we create customized solutions. I also do estate planning. Once clients' assets grow to a certain point, you want to make sure you're protecting those assets. That also includes things like insurance. And then in addition to that, we do retirement planning. And the retirement planning goes beyond just the one goal of retiring. It also incorporates other financial goals that need to balance out with that, such as educational planning for children, maybe caring for a parent. So there's a lot of things that we do on the financial planning side. And through all of it, I always take a tax smart lens. So that's really where my CPA background and my tax background come into play. Is we always make sure to take a tax smart approach to any sort of financial and investment advice provided.
Yeah, that's really unique. And to be able to offer all of those services under one roof. And I can't help but think as you were speaking, here your dad said how back in 1990, he's thinking of wanting to do more and securities license and trying to create a bigger umbrella, so to speak, of services he could provide. And now each of his children, as we'll get to John Jr. in a second on the tax side, is really bringing that to the forefront. The vision that started with just him. I mean, I don't even know if at that point, John, did you have your first child yet in 1990?
Was I thinking that one day I'd be here sitting at this podcast with my 3 children? If that was your question, no, I could not imagine.
with a book that you all wrote. So really, really cool. But you had a vision for what you wanted to create. And even though at that time it was you creating it, look what you've created now with your children. And on that, Nicole, for the investment side, it really is important to be able to help people understand what to do with their money. Because I think a lot of people too, even though some people may think that, oh, well, it all depends on how much you make. Yes, that's part of it. And we'll talk about this a lot when it's you and I in our episode. It's also how much you keep, which ties into the tax side, and what you do with it. And in my mind, wealth is generated and lost on those margins. The people that are able to capitalize on those margins are the people that put themselves in a position that I've seen throughout my years to really retire in a comfortable situation and be able to pass wealth on to future generations. I feel like the people who aren't as judicious with those margins, no matter how big or small they might be, are the ones that really put themselves in a compromising position in the future. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Nope. And we say that all the time. It's not just about what you make. It's once you get to that point, ensuring that you keep it. So absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm looking forward to talking more about that with you as well and getting a little more in detail on that as well. So then on to the more dedicated tax side, John Jr. And I should say as well that I've been working with you all since 2012, I think, was when it was your dad. And I don't believe any of you were involved at that time, 13 years ago. So it's hard to believe John Sr. that, my goodness, it's been 13 years. But you've been with me through a lot of different business transactions and changes. And we've been able to see eye to eye on a lot of things. It's been fun to work with with you and now with your children in different capacities, but John Jr., who's taken over a lot of the tax side of things. And I said to John Sr. when he was on the show a few years ago, or about 2.5 years ago, I said, boy, sometimes when I talk to John Jr., I'm like, am I talking to John Sr.? It's somewhat scary at times because, and not in a bad way at all, but your voices, your demeanor, your cadence, the way you think through things, very analytical, which I love. And it's fun. It's fun to have worked with you. And now as you've kind of phased a little bit out of that tax side, get to work with your son in that. So if you wouldn't mind, John Jr., go into a little bit more of your background history and what you're doing now with the firm.
Sure, absolutely. And believe it or not, 2012 sort of was involved. My father and my mother always taught us at a young age that probably the greatest thing we learned from them was to have a strong work ethic. So they always had us working even at a very young age. So in high school, all three of us actually did work for my father's practice. That's really where I got my introduction to accounting. So not even sure if he remembers this, but back in, it was probably around 2012 or maybe probably a little bit earlier actually, but he was actually teaching a course at Wagner College. So while he was working for the firm, doing some basic back office stuff, bookkeeping, filing, even document shredding, he was teaching a course at Wagner College. It was an intro to accounting course. And I actually wound up indirectly, not officially, but took that course while he was teaching it. So I was doing all the homeworks, taking all the midterm exams, the final exams. Wow. So that really is sort of what introduced me to the accounting world, was not only working here, doing a lot of the back office stuff, but even taking that course. So going into college, I sort of already knew that I wanted to go into the accounting field. So I think that gave me a good head start when starting college, because a lot of people, it takes 2 years to figure out what field they want to go into. So that allowed me to get my bachelor's degree in both accounting and finance at Quinnipiac University. Shortly after graduating, took my CPA exam, passed that, and went on to work for Pricewaterhouse, which was a Big Four firm. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working for a large firm, working in Manhattan, but you really didn't feel the personal touch or connection. You're working for these your clients are $1 billion companies, and you're dealing with middle management at the firm. So although you are at the end of the day helping people, you don't feel that personal connection and touch, and the person you're ultimately helping doesn't even know you're helping them. So that's why after about 2.5, 3 years working there, I thought there was time to move over, start working for my father's firm. Love the fact that worked with dental practices across the country, small businesses. So slowly learned that field and the tax field as it relates to that. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, became a partner within the CPA firm. Also became securities licensed at a young age, but passed my CFP exam a few years ago. Eventually became the president, managing partner of our firm. So that's pretty much the short story of my background. And primarily what we do on the tax and accounting side is work very closely with dentists and dental practices across the country, not just helping them with tax compliance work, which again is important, and many firms do that. But where I find the most value is helping our clients save money each and every day, working with them to help lower their largest expenditure in life, which is taxes. To me, that's really where the value and the pleasure comes from in doing what we do.
Hey, everybody. Quick question. How many kids are you seeing who are mouth breathing, snoring, not sleeping well, maybe struggling with focus or behavior in school? You know something's off, but we're never taught how to treat these patients early. So we wait for more teeth, wait for maturity, wait for the permanent dentition. Meanwhile, that child keeps suffering. Well, it's time to change that paradigm, which is why I've partnered with Dr. Daniel Camacho to launch the Early Orthodontic Treatment Comprehensive, a hands-on 2-day immersive experience in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, this November 13th and 14th. You'll learn to identify these patients early, read CBCT images, coordinate with medical and OMT colleagues, and deliver proactive dentofacial orthopedic treatment. You'll study real cases, then watch it done live on actual patients. So you'll return home with the confidence needed to implement it in your practice on day one. And the support doesn't stop there. The registration fee includes my full 26-hour online course, a live remote case review in spring 2027, and a full year of discounted coaching. And if you enroll by June 30th, you can save $1,000 off the registration fee. We're keeping this intimate, just $20. So click the link in the show notes and grab your spot before it's sold out. We'll see you in Fort Lauderdale. And obviously taxes are so huge. It's such a big part of everything, especially as you start to have a higher income and a higher paid job or own more businesses or have different revenues coming in from different areas and how those are classified and the entity selection you have. And you all are so knowledgeable on that and very willing and able to work with any other advisors that someone might have to be able to help find those solutions. I find also that people tend to, and we'll talk about this during our episode together in much more detail, but we're strategically going to put our episode out in the fall of 2026. And the reason for that is most people think that you plan for your taxes in the beginning of the year when they're due, let's say, April 15th or for corporate, March 15th. Most people start thinking taxes in the beginning of that year. And one of the things that I learned from your father very early on was you start thinking of taxes for the beginning of the year that you're having to pay the taxes in. So you don't wait, but then you meet with your advisor periodically throughout the year as needed, and that will change for everybody's needs based on what they're going through. But you have to have a fall planning meeting because those meetings that we have, I would say, and John Sr. and Jr., tell me if you disagree, but those are way more intense than our meetings that we have around tax time. I mean, around tax time, it's like, yeah, we were off on this or on this, so you guys are usually quite good with the projections, but things can change. So it's like this was where we have to tweak, or you had this extra income come in or this extra expense come in that we didn't anticipate. But the work, the heavy lifting was done in the fall for that tax year. So for 2026, when we go over our episode in the fall, it's talking about tax planning. Would you agree that that's pretty much the most important time when the heaviest lifting is done?
Absolutely, yeah. The meeting to vote over the tax return is almost a formality because at that point, you already know what's going to happen. If you had that detailed planning meeting at the end of the year, you should know what your income is going to look like. You should know what all your deductions are. You should know what tax smart strategies you've implemented to help save you money. So absolutely, that meeting is by far the most important meeting because once December 31st comes around, there's basically little to nothing that you could do to help lower your tax bill for that year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you have years that are higher revenue years, there are things you can do tax-wise, like you said, before December 31st. But if you wait, you can't. And then once those books close, at the end of that year, that calendar year, you're in a tough position. And I see so many people that happens to who they don't think about it or they don't have an advisor that's proactive with them. And then they're like, oh my God, comes beginning of the following year where you're paying taxes for the previous year. And they're like, I've got this huge tax bill. I wish I had known I would have bought a new x-ray machine. Or I'm thinking to myself, why do you not have an advisor? And I'll often say this to people, like, did your advisor not try to meet with you in the fall? And those numbers I like to call almost phantom income. I mean, it's essentially money that you are leaving on the table. If you were going to buy that piece of machinery anyway, you're taking a huge hit, especially now with the very generous Section 179 deductions. And again, things we'll get into in much more detail during your episode. And we'll really get pretty granular on some of the strategies that you think and you see can be taken advantage of. So I'm excited for all of that. So back to John Sr. for a second. So we've had a couple books that you've put out, and we talked about that when you were first on the show. And we did about I think 5-part episode where we broke it up, and really that's received a ton of views over the years where people looked at that, and we got really in detail on a lot of topics, and it was great. So you went through that book. What's different? Number one, what prompted you to write another book? Because it's still on my list of to-dos to try to write one. It's something I need to start to work on, but it's not easy. It's not an easy process, especially when we're talking accounting and finance, when it changes almost in real time. You start to write one. I can only imagine you're writing one, and then there's a new tax law, or there's something else that changes. You're dealing with different states and statutory regulations and compliance. So after going through one book, and then I believe it was kind of a revision of that book, what led you to write another one? And then how did you incorporate each of your children's expertise into that?
Sure. Great question. So I'll go back to 2008. There was a major financial crisis across the country. Primarily that was mortgage defaults, people losing their homes. I saw good, hardworking people. Their life work just get thrown away overnight. And I said to myself, we have a major problem in this country. people just spend too much, they spend more than they earn, and they don't have the basic understanding of finance. So I said, I need to write a book on the subject of financial literacy. Initially, the intent here was to make sure everyone had a fighting chance and wouldn't have to have those type of financial horror stories that I saw just too many people experience going back to that crisis. So that was Financial Independence, Getting to Point X. That book was written primarily for that purpose. In that book, we had 10 chapters on wealth management. We had a chapter on establishing successful dental practice. And then the last chapter was the power of compounding. To me, these were like essential things that everybody needed to know. Speaking of which, my children, my son made me just think about that when he was talking about working and helping me grade exams and helping me prep for my professor courses back in the college days when I was adjunct professor. But my children at that young age, while they were in high school, part of their internship was not only to pass the Series 7 exam at the age of 18 or 19, very, very young, but in later years, they actually sat by my side, helping me write that first book. I think that experience is what brought them to who they are today in terms of the financial professionals that they are. So that book was written for a real basic purpose, is to provide financial literacy across the country. No matter how poor or how wealthy you are, I wanted to make it very relevant to the reader. And that book was a big success. Then came major tax legislation in 2017. That basically was the 2017 Tax Act. So the next book I wrote was in 2018. That was a second edition to the same book, but again, completely updated for the latest tax laws that passed at that point in time. But more importantly, we incorporated tax smart strategies within all the wealth management issues. So that's where we got from book 1 to book 2. Once again, big success. Everyone that's read it has said nothing but great things about it. Bringing us to the latest book, Trump had passed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It was the most historical tax law changes in history. It really was a game changer. My publisher came to me and said, John, it's time to write a new book here. And I said, terrific, but this time we're going to make it different. Being that I've worked throughout most of my life helping people, and that's what it's all about, is helping people achieve financial independence. We call that Point X. I said I want to go to the next level with this. And I said, not only do I want to show people how to become financially independent, but I want to show them how to create generational wealth. So this book, what makes this unique is, number one, my son, by the way, who spearheaded all the tax smart strategies throughout all 12 chapters. It gives you cutting edge tax strategies that you could implement that'll put real money in your pocket today. I'm not talking about $10. I'm talking about tens of thousands of dollars that you're going to be able to save by implementing these strategies. To my son's point earlier, most people think of a CPA or a tax advisor. Their busy time of the year is February 1st to April 15th. That's not the case in our office. Our busiest time of the year is October 1st through December 31st, because we're helping every client strategize on how to save money. And then when they come to us to get the tax return done after December 31st, rather, that's the easy part. That's just the compliance part. But the true value that we add to every single decision you need to make, and believe it or not, almost every decision we make in life is a financial decision in one way or another. Especially your investment decisions, there's tax consequences almost in every turn of the page. So the new book, The Generational Wealth Code, not only gives you the most updated tax laws and most updated tax strategies, but now we show people, dentists in particular, how to create generational wealth. And, you know, we're living proof of that. I spoke about my poor immigrant parents. They took it to the first level. I took it to the next level. And now my children are going to take it yet to another level. I think that's what we all want. It's fair to say that your grandfather, your parents wanted a better life for their children. I'm sure that, I know you long enough, Mike. I know that's your motto as well. I mean, who wouldn't want that? So we're going to help you and your families create generational wealth. This way, with every new generation, it's going to be a little easier for them, and then maybe have a better lifestyle than we had. That at least is the goal there. The other very unique thing about this book, being that my daughter Christine, her life is dedicated to real estate, we dedicated an entire chapter to real estate investing, everything from the basics of why real estate investing is probably the number one way to accumulate wealth over the long run. Most of the wealthiest people have gotten there by accumulating real estate investments. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about using other people's money, which is basically borrowing money to use leverage to make money under real estate. And then all the huge, tremendous tax advantages that come from that as well. So I'm proud to say that this book was authored by me, but clearly co-authored by the other three individuals on the screen, excluding you, of course, Mike. You didn't write this book. Nope. But we all added our level of expertise, and I truly believe it's the best book ever written on this subject. It's definitely the best book I've ever been part of writing.
Yeah, I appreciate you going into that, because I love hearing the stories, as my audience knows, about how we get to this point and the journey you've been on, and the fact that you're writing this to try to stay current. As I said, when things are changing so fast with tax law and investment regulations and rules, and that's where it's so amazing having your three children that are in this arena. You have three experts, you're an expert as well, but then you have different opinions from them. An interesting question. So how you hit on something interesting, which I love, and I agree. Your goal is to, and you said it perfectly, knowing me well, to provide a life for your children that they will be able to do even better than I did, or my wife and I did. How have you found balancing that with raising children who have a tremendous work ethic and are driven? Because I see so many times, clearly, your three children as they sit here, and I guess they can chime in afterwards if they agree or disagree with the statement, what you're going to say about it. But in all seriousness, you've not only raised children who understand they have a tremendous work ethic and drive and desire to be significant contributors to society and help others in that. It's wonderful that you all have that as a central core vision of what you do. I see so many times, though, there are families where there's a parent who does really, really well, and the children end up spoiled. They end up not valuing the work, don't have the work ethic. They squander the family money or assets that were there. So what would you say is something you could advise others on who are doing very well, who are generating what we will call generational wealth? How can they pass that to their children, but not create children who are spoiled and don't appreciate the value of hard work?
Yeah, and that's a difficult question to answer, because every situation is going to be different. Some people may not have that DNA in them that brings them down that road. I think I've been blessed with my children. So again, part of this is biological or psychological, but I believe as a parent, the best way to teach your children the difference between right and wrong is by leading by example. What I'd like to think is that they know how hard I've worked my whole life. They know how dedicated I've been. I've shared success stories and also failure stories that certain clients had. So teaching them at an early age is critically important. That, again, is part of why this book was written, because I believe financial literacy is something that should be required in every single high school.
Yes.
College, it should definitely be there, and it's not. Unfortunately, very often they're being taught a lot of other things. We won't get into that right now, but they're not being taught basic concepts in finance and knowing the difference between right and wrong. So my children know me very well. Again, it's about being hardworking, ethical, always honest, always looking out for other people's interests. I never wake up in the morning and say, oh, I can't wait to get to work. I can't imagine how much money I'm going to make today. To me, what gets me out of bed is, what am I going to do today to make somebody's life better? And I think that same philosophy has transformed from me into my children. I have to say, all three of them are very well-rounded. I have to give my wife some credit where credit is due. She's the happy-go-lucky one. She's the one who knows how to have a good time. She's got a great playlist, and I just sort of tag along. So my wife's famous words are, there has to be balance in life. So I'm one end of it, she's the other end of it, somewhere in between. I guess we find balance there. So I wish there was a better answer I could give to you than that, but other than leading by example, that is going to be what you need to do. Then there has to be a little luck there, and somehow they have to be self-motivated. And I just want to add that the fact that I put them to work at a very young age in my office, just to see what a work environment's like, told them that they had to show up on time, they had to be there. If they didn't show up, they weren't going to get paid that paycheck. You have to show them that basic discipline, the value of a dollar, and that's part of the whole education process. So I think we got a little lucky there, but at the end of the day, it sort of worked out. The combination of what I was able to teach them and that what my wife was able to teach them turned them into the young professionals they are today.
I appreciate that. If any of the kids want to chime in on that, of what kind of motivated you, love to hear your thoughts on it.
I would add to that, both my parents, I would say, were never uncomfortable having a conversation with us about money at a very young age. And I think part of the problem that a lot of families have is they're nervous around money. We see, I have lots of friends and other family members. People are nervous around money is because they don't understand how money works. Yeah. And I think it's really important for parents to have conversations with their kids starting at a very young age about that. And my dad always included us in those kinds of conversations from very young ages.
Yeah, I so agree. And I'm kind of chuckling as you say that because my kids, when the time this airs, one 20-year-old, one 17-year-old. And, when they were younger, we're sitting around the dinner table and I'm not talking in-depth taxes, but we're talking about like when they had an allowance, what money comes out of that? Or do you get to keep all of that? Or what are taxes? Why do we pay taxes? Understanding how the money you make and the money you earn, you don't keep all of it. You told them from a very early age, if you go to work and you make $1, you don't keep that dollar if you work for someone else. The government takes a large percentage of that depending on where you live and how much you're making every year. So we would have those conversations. And I know at the time, and just for the parents out there, yes, there's eye rolls. Yes, the kids are like, oh God, Dad, again. And I'm not saying every dinner conversation every night should be this, but there were times when there would be an event or something would come up and I would just talk to them about money. I think the mentality a lot of people are raised with is money doesn't grow on trees and things aren't free. And it's kind of almost like this negative connotation around money, or all the bad in the world is from the rich. And I think we get scared of money. And you said it, people just don't understand money, so they run away from it. And I know for myself, Renee and I, we came up with very different financial backgrounds in our respective family situations, but neither of us really understood money. My mentality was just make my student loans last until the next disbursement. I mean, it's sad to say, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but that's what it was. I didn't understand it. I kind of came from a family where it was tended to not save as much and spend what you make, and that was my mentality. And Renee came from a more of a very budgeting background. Her dad was a very successful turbine builder and machinist with GE, but there's a cap on what they could make. It was a very good, stable blue collar job, but they had a big pension, and that's kind of how they got their payout. But at the time, when you're just working day to day, making ends meet can be a challenge. So she came up with that background. So two of us together, she was super nervous to even want to save or invest because she was worried about that next bill coming in. And I was kind of like, well, let's just spend what we got until we get the next check. And we had a real reality check when we met and got together and started realizing our relationship was more serious and when we got engaged. It was tough. And so I encouraged that conversation. And for us, we read books at that time. Now I recommend people read the book that you all put out, but we read, and I also recommend, in addition to that, books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, books like Smart Couples Finish Rich. Just get thinking. That at least starts the conversation about what is money? How do we treat money? Because I just didn't have the most positive view of money, and I didn't understand it. And so that's why in my children, Renee and I both worked hard to have those conversations with them. Actually, this summer, I hope to record an episode with my older daughter. When she went off to college, she's now finished her sophomore year, we sat down and we built her a budget. And we paid her a certain amount per month. She gets a monthly wage, and we laid out all her anticipated expenses, and then we adjusted them as needed. And she has expenses and she has a budget, and we set her up so that she has an overflow account that yields a higher interest. And when she saves and is fiscally responsible with that, she can start to save into that other account, and then those monies can go get invested. And if she doesn't, and she overspends her budget, she's got to figure it out. And if she comes to mom and dad, she's got to explain why she's going over budget. And an interesting thing that did for her, she tends to be a little bit averse to spending. She doesn't want to spend much. So that's actually helped her in the reverse too, because we're like, gee, you're under budget. Like you've got some margin here. If you want to go on a weekend trip with your girlfriends down to the beach, like you can do that. Like you've saved, you've been fiscally responsible, and you've spent under budget. You haven't blown it every weekend and going and eating out all the time. So those life lessons, I feel like we're certainly not perfect at it, my wife and I, but I do feel like what you said, I just wanted to highlight and underscore that, talking about it early with them when they're young, even though they might give you the glazed eye look, it really does start to set in. And then, from there, they start to understand money better. We had them read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when they were like in their early teens. I know it's going to sound crazy to some, but they don't understand it all, but it at least opened the discussion for, what is money? Maybe you want to start a business, because if you just go work for someone, you don't have as much control over your money. So those were some of the messages. Any of the others, John Jr. and Nicole, do you care to chime in on the mentality towards money or the lessons that were learned that helped you be fiscally responsible and driven to succeed financially, even knowing that your dad had done well?
Okay. Yep. So I would say leading by example, as my father mentioned, was really one of the biggest ones for me. Seeing how, no matter how well he may have done and my mother may have done, they didn't spend. They were always conscientious of the way they spent. They weren't spendthrift by any means. And my mother also was never, I had to give her credit for this, she was never afraid to say no to us either. So I think that's another big one as well. It's easy to want to spoil children really at any age. But, back when Toys R Us was around, we would go in and she would say, you could pick one thing each and that's it. She would never buy us like crazy designer clothes and brands growing up, because she said, I'm not spending that kind of money. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So it's really a matter of just setting a mentality of what's important to you to spend, and those values wind up translating down, I think, to future generations.
That's so true. And again, to kind of make a personal story of it, we're doing some renovations of one of the properties that we own in Florida, not our primary residence, but a rental property. And we're doing some renovations, and we spent a lot of the past week, my wife and I, shopping for this stuff. We went through and we were price shopping and looking to, we wanted to be very nice. It's a very nice condo, but we also want to be responsible with it. We were basically redecorating the whole thing. It needed a major overhaul. So when we were going through it, we were online and price shopping and going to different furniture stores and price shopping and looking at different flooring options and going through all of this. And the kids see that. They do. They see it. They saw us. And then Renee, my wife, went through literally last night and showed my younger daughter, Kendall, the spreadsheet that she built, laying out every expense. And we had a budget, and we had a budget that we wanted to stay within. And she showed everything we bought. Every wall hanging and pillow of what we were doing and how we worked to stay in budget. And she saw this huge list of items. And then when my wife was telling me today, she's like, yeah, Kendall said, like, wow, you guys actually like that. You got a ton of stuff for that price. They start to see that you don't just go out and just start writing blank checks. And even if we could afford to spend more on that, as long as we got really good quality stuff, yes, it took us a little bit of our time, but it shows them that you can really save in the end on that. And then you make an investment. We're also teaching them you have to invest in the properties you own or whatever you own to keep them at a level where you can then yield higher rent and be able to continue to rent those properties and get passive income from them. So yeah, those showing you that you don't just go out and spend, and you have to earn it. I don't know if, as the father, John Sr., if you want to speak to that, but that has been something I found that we've done as parents as well that I think has been helpful.
Mike, you're right on the money with everything you just said. a reoccurring theme throughout the Generational Wealth Code book that we just wrote is that not only do you need to read that book, I'm talking to your audience, but your children have to read that book as well. So many examples, whether it's about budgeting, we have a whole section about budgeting, living responsibly. Believe it or not, your children and the listeners' children should also be reading that book. Things like paying for college education. We tell stories in there how parents couldn't say no to their kids because they wanted to go big. They got into an expensive private school, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Parents couldn't afford it. They put their 3 kids through school, and they found themselves in financial trouble because of it. So letting them understand, it's one thing, as a parent, I think you could relate to what I'm about to say. When you're a parent and you say something to your children, they don't often like to listen, especially if they become teenagers. They sort of shrug it off, but they'll listen to somebody else. So if they can't speak to me or my 3 children, your children, let them read the book, at least the sections that pertain to this portion of their life. And there are, again, this book was written for someone that's 16 years old and somebody that's 81 years old. It doesn't matter what your age is. There's relevant things for you to read in here to become financially literate and more financially responsible. So I would encourage, your listeners that have children, if they pick up a copy of the book for themselves, well, pick one up for your children as well. And no one's asking them to read the whole 400 pages of it. Just read the sections that are relevant to decisions they have to make at this point in their life. Even a chapter on managing debt. You have an 18-year-old got their first credit card. They think that's a ticket to buy everything and anything they want. And as you know, it's not. That's a ticket to becoming financially ruined. So learn a little bit about the financial responsibility of using a credit card responsibly. So this book is definitely a guide. It's a must-read guide, regardless of what someone's age is. And that's the way I like to look at it as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. That's a great point because the kids are old enough to understand, even though we think they're not. They need to start. It opens a conversation. It starts to open the dialogue about these things, for sure. John Jr., what about you? I haven't gone to you yet on sort of the upbringing side of things and how you were able to be so driven to succeed, even knowing that you had parents who were doing well, but still be motivated and not be, as we would say, spoiled or entitled.
Sure, absolutely. I think, again, just echoing what both my sisters said, I think it's just really leading by example. And truthfully, this topic almost scares me as well because I have a almost 3-year-old daughter. And my biggest concern is I want to make sure she grows up to work hard, have a strong work ethic, not grow up spoiled and feel like whatever she wants, she could have. So it's definitely leading by example and then teaching at a young age what the real value of a dollar is. I'm not even sure if it's my father that engraved this in me, but always at a young age, I always thought before buying anything, always relate it back to hours. So if I want to buy a $7 cup of coffee from Starbucks and I'm making $20 an hour in high school and after taxes, I'm lucky I'm walking away with $15, I have to work a half hour to be able to afford that cup of coffee. So always, I think, relaying it back to that and always thinking of, is there a better way to pay for this, or if there's a financially smart way to go about it. I think that just was always engraved in my mind at a young age. And not saying be super frugal, but at the same time, understanding and valuing the money you're working for, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I love too that you added the taxes in there first before you could tell that dad had that influence. Like I just said, my kids, it's like, you might say you're getting 20 an hour, but you're not keeping 20 an hour. So when you buy that coffee, you gotta take that out first. So just to kind of go through the last part of this discussion here, if you could each go through, kind of go in the same order we've gone in here, starting with John Sr. What do you want the audience to know about the episode we're going to do one-on-one with each of you? If you could just take a few minutes and talk about the main things that you want to get across during that episode to let the viewers know why they should listen.
Okay, so the next episode, I'm going to be covering a chapter, the new chapter in our book called Real Estate Investing. So I'm going to be focusing on the basic principles of real estate investing and why so many people have accumulated substantial wealth and created generational wealth through real estate. I'm also going to cover some of the basic tax smart strategies related specifically to real estate. And in my opinion, real estate is I can say with confidence, it is the single best method to accumulate generational wealth because the tax savings associated with that are tremendous. They're not just valuable every year when you buy the property instead of renting, the benefit of depreciation associated with that, which we call the phantom deduction. My daughter's going to talk about doing 1031 exchanges, the benefit of kicking the can down the road with that. And speaking of kicking the can, even after we kick the can and pass away, then there's going to be a step up in basis. So now your children will inherit that property income tax free. You never paid taxes on that appreciation. And now that next generation is going to continue to grow from there. That's going to be the primary focus of my session, which is, again, I think one of the most powerful tools out there. And I'm so happy that my daughter wrote that chapter, but she's going to deal more with the advanced strategies. Now, one other thing that we talk about on and on throughout each chapter, each section, which is so true. We're going to teach you how to turn the Internal Revenue Code into the Generational Wealth Code. Sounds pretty corny to say that, but making the Internal Revenue Code and the strategies that we're going to implement and the tax smart strategies that my son will come up with, allowing you to save a lot more money of what you're making every single year, and also to ensure that down the road after you pass on, that the government doesn't get 1 penny more than the law requires. So turning the Internal Revenue Code into Generational Wealth Code is going to be a key theme throughout this book as well, regardless of which of the 12 wealth management issues we're covering in the 12 chapters of the book. So that's a short version of what I'm going to be covering during my solo episode.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Christine, how about you?
Yeah, so during my episode, as my dad mentioned, I'm kind of going to be taking it a step further. You know, we were just talking about the fact that all three of us here, well, four of us here, but my sister, my brother, and I have really strong work ethics. And it's kind of funny that we all ended up in the same industry as our parents, but it doesn't always work out that way. And so although you may be a really savvy real estate investor, anyone who's listening to this today, if you own your own properties, doesn't necessarily mean that your kids or your kids' kids are going to know what to do with that real estate once you pass away. Mm-hmm. And so for families out there who do not have heirs to take over their real estate when they pass away, being able to use a 1031 exchange to defer taxes and invest in a passive real estate fund like the Delaware Statutory Trust, which is the only true passive investment form that investors can 1031 exchange in and out of, is really the number one estate planning tool that real estate investors can use. As morbid as it sounds, what we say at my company is if you swap until you drop or you defer until you die, your heirs can get a step up in cost basis. You get to receive passive monthly income during all the years of your life that you don't want to manage real estate anymore. And you avoid worst case scenario, which is when you pass away, your kids fighting over what to do with that real estate. When you do pass away, we refer to it as you can have strings from your grave. If one child wants to do an exchange, one child wants to sell the property and keep the taxes, they can all go their separate ways after their passing. And so we'll talk about the benefits of the DST, and then we'll also briefly talk about, Mike, I think we're going to talk a little bit about QOZs, qualified opportunity zone funds, which can really help investors who have large capital gains from the sale of other types of investments outside of real estate. And with the new legislation, which we don't have to get into too much today, but it's really been revamped with Trump's new bill. So starting in 2027, there's going to be a whole new set of rules following his original issuance of the legislation from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk. And as I said, I'll add some personal anecdotes on the 1031 exchange side of things, and excited to talk about the qualified opportunity zones and what opportunities lie down there for that. I think it's actually a really forward-thinking piece of legislation, because we need to invest in those communities that are underserved, and maybe were developed in industrial communities of the past that have just been decimated, by economic changes and the way business is conducted. Really, there's a lot of those towns, especially in where we were from in upstate New York, that it's really common to see. But there's even other communities that are just underdeveloped, and rural communities, and to get people investing in those areas, what better way to do it than give them some tax advantages? So I think it was smart. So I'm really looking forward to picking your brain on both of those things. It'll be exciting. So awesome. Nicole, how about you?
So, Mike, we'll be talking about tax smart investment strategies. This expands beyond real estate investing to include everything such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, as long as some unique investing strategies that we offer. And this is a prime example of individual investors, clients. They sometimes shy away from investing because they don't fully understand it. Mm-hmm. And that could be a huge mistake. Investing is a way to earn money without having to work an extra day of your life. So if you can imagine being able to double, triple, quadruple your money over the next few decades without having to actually work a single minute or hour more, clearly that's something that everyone should be taking advantage of. And the reason a lot of clients and investors tend to be a little sometimes concerned about it is because historically, they maybe lost money in the market. And again, that goes back to not understanding either the types of investments they're investing in or understanding their own profile. So one thing that we always start with is analyzing clients' risk profile and making sure they're investing according to what they're comfortable with, so that they don't sell when the market starts to sell off, and then they don't try to buy back in when the market starts to go upwards, because clearly that's not a good way to make money. So investing, again, it's one of the best ways to make money, and we always take a tax smart lens to doing that. And in choosing the right investments based on the client's profile, along with the power of compounding, which again allows clients to double, quadruple their investments, is one of the most powerful tools to gain wealth and financial independence.
Awesome. And is it possible to spend a little bit of time too on why people should have a financial advisor or someone to guide them through those decisions? Because I find a lot of people just think, why not just go, invest on my own through E-Trade? And I'm not saying if someone can't or shouldn't do that at all, but the value of having someone there to help guide you through those decisions, I feel is very important. But is that something we could speak to a little bit as well?
That's absolutely something we'll speak to. And what I always like to say is, we're going to be talking to individuals who are experts in their own industries, and you're not necessarily experts in the finance and investing world. And that's what I do every day, all day. So if you can have someone really think of me as a financial coach and help you through it. For example, I wouldn't try to extract one of my own teeth if I had a cavity or an infection. And so when you really, once the finances start getting a little bit more complicated, it's really important to leverage financial partners, especially ones that do have a tax background, because, we're able to see everything through a tax lens, which, as we mentioned, is the number one expense. So a 10% rate of return at the end of the day, if you're getting 50% in taxes, that's really 5%. So you always want to make sure that you're not only taking advantage of different market opportunities, but you're also thinking it through a tax smart lens.
Yeah, that's so important. And what you said, I like about it being the complexity. When it's simple, like if someone has, wants to do a little side investing or invest in a company, they like, fine. But when you want to create wealth and you want to start expanding, when you start talking about these areas where you may be involved in real estate, whether it's conventional owning properties and or DST type of approaches to things, when you start getting involved in qualified opportunity zones or have multiple businesses that are generating revenue, when you start to put that all together, it can get really confusing. And I can speak to this as somebody who has done all of that. You start to you almost lose your perspective a little bit. And it's really nice to have that central person there whose job it is. And yes, you do pay them to do that, but they're doing their job to look at that from kind of that 30,000 foot view and say, okay, here is the bigger picture. And then it just, with you guys, it's even nicer. You have the ability to have the tax side as well. But yeah, I think it's really important for people to understand, especially those out there listening in the audience who are higher net worth individuals or higher earning individuals. When you start having that money, what you do with it and how you treat that money, it can be really helpful sometimes to have an objective stance from someone who's not a family member, whose job it is to do this and know this. We always joke about my brother-in-law, right, who tells me this is some great deal that they've got to go invest in and buy into a restaurant with my cousin, right? And I hear stories like that all the time. I think we're guilty of that a lot in the medical and dental arena. You all, I'm sure, would probably, well, I don't put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing you probably agree. We tend to be pretty independent thinkers, and we've achieved at high levels. We've been successful in our education and a lot of times in our businesses, and we sometimes think we can do it all ourselves. And when we run our own businesses, we do a lot of things ourselves. So I feel like that sometimes leads people down a path where they don't feel they need financial advice either. But as you said, the coaching side of it is just as important as the actual X's and O's of what to do.
Yeah, I want to just interject something there as well. Mm-hmm. The way we have to look at this, or the way people should look at it, when they're paying someone, whether it's for tax advice, investment advice, real estate investing advice, whatever it might be, that is not a cost. That's absolutely not a cost. It's not an expense. It's an investment. If you're spending $5,000 on an advisor to show you how to do something better, regardless of what it might be in the financial world, if that's not generating for you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, maybe even $10,000 a year forever, if it's not doing that for you, then you just have the wrong advisor. So people are that mindset. Chapter 1 says live within your means, don't spend money unless it's necessary. And what I'm saying is that paying for a financial team, even a financial one-person team, you need somebody who specializes in a particular area, because whatever fee it may cost you to get that service, you're going to get that back hopefully tenfold over the long run. So the perspective of should I do it on my own versus should I hire an expert to do it? Definitely have to hire the expert to do it. Don't believe you can do it on your own. Make sure you're working with an expert, somebody that is, studied this area, has been doing it for many, many years, that could actually add value to what you're trying to accomplish there. And that, of course, is financial independence and generational wealth.
No, absolutely. And John Jr., want to let us know a little bit more about your episode and what we'll be talking about together when it's a solo episode with you and I?
Sure, absolutely. So I think it was either you, Mike, or my father that mentioned earlier that almost every decision in life is a financial decision. And truthfully, to take that a step further, almost every financial decision has a tax consequence. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, what we're going to be talking about primarily is tax planning and tax smart strategies that you can implement both personally and within your dental practice to help you achieve financial independence and keep more of what you make each and every year. In addition to that, we spoke earlier about the fact that you shouldn't be working with someone that just works on tax compliance, because if you're doing all your tax planning when you're preparing your return, that's not planning at all. You should be meeting with your advisor periodically throughout the year, but especially in the fourth quarter before the year's over to implement any of those strategies that we're going to discuss. I think part of our conversation will probably also talk about what it means to work with a dental CPA, an accountant that specializes in working with dentists, because to take that even a step further, not only should you be doing that tax planning, but you want to be working with someone that understands you, understands your field, understands your industry. If you own your own practice, someone that's going to be setting up your accounting records to meet dental industry standards, provides you with tax services, understands certain expense items, line items that are specific to dental industry. Someone that provides you with tax planning advice, also provides you with dental practice advisory services, and then someone that also can help you in a tax smart way buy or sell your practice down the road when you are ultimately ready to sell. So every one of those financial decisions at the end of the day has a tax implication You want to make sure that you're implementing those strategies and working with someone that understands you and could best serve.
Yeah. And if we can, is it possible to talk a little bit about what you just alluded to, but even maybe get to the next level of practice transitions where I know it's big for young docs coming out. Do I join a practice? Do I not? I know I can't offer specific advice for each individual, but just some of the financial circumstances that may make sense for someone to be an employee for a while or own the business, and how some of those transitions are structured from a tax perspective so that it's fair and equitable to both sides. I know there's a lot of confusion. Sometimes the senior docs want to hold more equity or divest more or less, or whatever the case might be. And then also the corporate side of things where people are selling using EBITDA to kind of create these big multiples if they can, and trying to sell to a corporate, but then working back. Would we be able to get into some of that a little bit as well and talk about the general examples of those types of things?
Absolutely. I think most people feel that the only negotiating part of a practice purchase is the sales price, but they don't realize there's multiple levels there, and each one of those levels have various tax implications. Mm-hmm. So it is important that when you're buying a practice, that you're working with someone that understands the way things should be structured from a tax savings perspective that's most advantageous to you. But also on the flip side, when you're 75 years old and you're ready to finally retire, you want to be working with someone that also could help you structure the sale in a tax advantageous way to you as well. Mm-hmm. So definitely could touch on some of those topics as well during our conversation.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. I'm really, really excited for this. I thank you all for your time, and not only time speaking on this on behalf of the audience, but your time you put into educating others. A lot of people do what they do, and they sit down and they do their job, and there's nothing wrong with that. They do it every day and go home and they turn it off. Clearly, the four of you do not do that, and you have put a lot of time and energy into educating others. And clearly that started with John, who's been an educator for the majority of his career, and passed that along to your children as well. But we need people to be putting this information out there. If you just do it to your clients or the people who can just afford to pay for certain services, as I mentioned to you all before we started recording, a lot of laypersons listen to the show as well, and they don't understand money or what's available to them. So I think they're going to benefit not only from hearing the conversation, but the book you put out, being able to make it accessible so people can get this information at a low cost is really, really awesome. And so I can't thank you enough for your time in doing that. And I'm really excited to do the episodes and the plan we put together to spread them out over the remainder of 2026. I think it's gonna be really, really effective to let people start to think about their finances in a different way. And it will make a difference. It'll make a difference for sure. And then if you wouldn't mind, just let us know, or let the audience know, when's the book coming out? How can they get a hold of that? And as well as how to contact you all in your respective industries, or maybe just the firm information and the website. I'll put it in the show notes as well, but just so people can reach out to you if they have any questions after this episode.
Mike, one last thing before we go. I just wanted to show you a cover of the book, The Generational Wealth Code. This is literally hot off the presses. We just got this delivered on Friday. It's not even in bookstores yet, but we highly recommend picking up a copy. It's going to be available on Amazon.com as well as BarnesandNoble.com. It's going to be available for sale on June 9th, but I'm encouraging readers to go out and pre-order it today. The reason I want them to do that is so that they could be one of the first people to get a copy of this book and could put into work everything we talked about today and what we're going to be talking about in the future podcast that we'll be doing together.
Awesome. Thank you. And then what is the best information contact for your firm website? Is that the best way for people to get in touch with you all? Is just go to the website?
Sure. John, why don't you just let Mike know, give him the answer to all that.
Sure. So our website address is ventotaxandwealth.com. Probably going to be the best way to reach us would be going there and clicking on the Contact Us page. Once you fill out a service request form, we'll basically reach out to you and set up a call for a follow-up meeting.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all so much. I'm really looking forward to this. This was great. And I know we've got it set for the future episodes. So really exciting things to come. Everybody go get the book, pre-order it. I'm excited to have it myself. And I love the suggestion too, having the kids read it. I am, as listeners of my show and followers of my show know, I am big on financial education and understanding money. You really, really have to do that. And it's never too late to start. I know a lot of people out there sometimes feel like they've missed their window, or it's too late, or it's too hard to make those changes. You can do it. Anyone can do it. You just have to have the knowledge, and working with people like the Ventos and understanding the way to navigate these waters is really going to make the difference. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having us on.
You're welcome. Take care, everybody. Talk
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Doc Podcast. Be sure to visit theorthocoach.com to get access to ADA CERT recognized CE courses or to schedule a private one-on-one coaching session with me. Also, if you know of someone who would make a great guest for this show, or if you'd like to be a guest yourself, please email me at drmike@theorthocoach.com. And be sure to join the Doc community on Facebook for more great content. Thanks so much for listening, and always remember, you have been blessed with the ability to do amazing things. The views expressed during this episode are for informational purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Wealth Services, LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Wealth Services, LLC nor any of its representatives may provide legal or tax advice. John Vento is a senior financial advisor with securities offered through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Nicole Vento is a financial advisor with securities offered through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. John Vento Jr. is a financial advisor with securities offered through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Christine Vento Conway is not affiliated with Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, or any of its affiliated companies. Any opinions or information provided by Christine Vento Conway are her own and do not represent the views of Cetera Wealth Services, LLC.